Up next is a discussion on the importance of educating and upskilling future citizens, moderated by Anjali Raina. As a leader of the Harvard Business School India Research Center, Anjali builds and maintains relationships with leaders in the South Asian region and seeks to understand the trends that are shaping the future of this region. Joining her on this panel are Honorable Susil Premajayantha, Munir Merali, and Dr. Tara Dimel and Kandiban Balendran. Honorable Susil Premajayantha is the Minister of Education for Sri Lanka. He's also an attorney at law and a master in public administration. Mr. Munir Merali is the Aga Khan Development Network's resident diplomatic representative to Bangladesh. He has over 25 years of experience as an entrepreneur and a diplomat, and serves as the senior advisor at the Harvard Business School. Dr. Tara Dimel was a senior lecturer in physiology at the Colombo University until 1994, when she was appointed as director of the Sri Lanka Foundation Institute. She was also the advisor to the President of Sri Lanka on social infrastructure and vice chairperson of the National Education Commission. Featured by his alma mater, Harvard Business School, as a dreamer among young leaders, Kandiban Balendran's dream is to build an education think tank in Sri Lanka. Following the launch of the Academics Group in early 2020, he launched the world's most awarded creative school, MAD, in Colombo, and the Ivy Future Leader Academy.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for inviting us here today. It's been a fabulous session, and I hope that this session will also get your brain juices flowing and get you thinking. Education, this session is really about education and upskilling future citizens. And the objective is to think about how to massively scale up the educational resources to reach the full potential of the workforce. You know, education has traditionally been seen through the lens of degrees and diplomas as a window of opportunity to economic opportunity, to livelihoods, and to economic prosperity. But in this age of digital design thinking and data, we need to really reimagine and redefine the role of education. Not only do we have digitalization and design thinking and data overload, we've got ChatGPT, AI, geopolitical tensions, climate crises. So the time has really come to reimagine, redesign what education is and how it's done. So it's not to see it not just as the window of opportunity to livelihood and economic prosperity, but also the ladder to well-being of all types: economic, social, physical, mental, just as we saw in the previous session. And we have an awesome panel of experts drawn from policy, diplomacy, practice, and politics to reimagine and redefine the role of education in the future. We have 3 of the panelists already with us, and the 4th panelist, or the Honorable Susil, will be joining us shortly. I'm hoping that after the discussion with the panelists, we'll also have time for audience engagement so that all of us can take a couple of ideas back with us to apply in our work, in our lives, and in our conversations with our colleagues and our families, as Dr. Rex just said. How do we actually parent our children? So if we can take a couple of ideas back with us that we can apply, then this will be time well spent. So there's a general question which I will ask all the panelists to comment on, and then I'll ask them specific questions, if that's okay with you. So the general question is, how do we educate, upskill and reskill citizens so that they are ready for the future? How do we build their learning muscle so that they are ready to engage with new livelihood and earning opportunities and build collaborative, competitive, and future-ready societies? What are the key areas that need to be focused on to bridge the gap between traditional education and the skills demanded by emerging industries and by the future? So since Honorable Susil isn't here, I'll start with you, Dr. Tara. Would you like to comment first?
Yes. Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to take all of us back a couple of years. Sometimes we become unmindful of the fact that we are just emerging, or we think we have emerged from a pandemic which had a very prolonged school closures. Well, in the West and in certain parts of Northern Europe and Northern America, it could be 6 months. But certainly in South Asia, Latin America, and in the African continent, school closures lasted as much as 20 or 21 months. So that created a massive learning deficit. So we have a group of students who may range from 10 years up to even 17, 18 years, who are entering society as we speak in a very undereducated, underskilled manner, and who have faced a triple crisis during the pandemic, which was not so long ago, like I said earlier. So what's the triple crisis? The triple crisis consists of a learning crisis, an emotional health crisis, because school shutdowns means home lockdowns as well. Some were in abusive homes and the traumas that accompanied it. And the third component of the crisis is a nutritional crisis, which is certainly ongoing, and Sri Lanka is one case in point. So in that context, when we are talking about the future, serving the alpha generation, for example, kids who are born between 2010 and 2024, and even preparing for the beta, which means kids who are going to be born after next year, I think we need to be very mindful of the fact of what kinds of learning losses took place, and unless and until those gaps are bridged, until and unless the skill deficits are bridged, and today it's about skills and competencies, not so much textbook learning, as everybody would agree, I think that's a point to start from. And if we neglect to be mindful of that, neglect to focus on the importance of undertaking some kind of remedial measures for the learning losses, I think we are going to be in a very, very serious situation in the years to come. Thank you.
Anytime you come is the right time. Welcome. So we just finished, Tara just finished commenting on the fact that the learning losses during the pandemic is something that we need to look at. The question that I had asked, which is, I'm going to now ask Kandi, and then I'll come back to you, Dr. Susil, is that how do we educate, upskill, and reskill citizens so that they are ready for the future? How do we build their learning muscles so that they are ready to engage with new livelihood and earning opportunities and build collaborative, competitive, and future-ready societies? What are the key areas that need to be focused on to bridge the gap between traditional education and the skills demanded by emerging industries? So now that Tara has commented on the learning losses, Kandi, can we hear your comment on this, and then I'll come to the Honorable Susil.
Sure, thank you so much, and thanks for joining us, everyone. Fantastic panel. I would like to start answering that question with the question itself to the audience. How many of us know that how many kids from our own villages are out of schools? Children not even got the blessings of go to the primary education or the secondary education. How many of us are aware of it? Hands up. How many of us are aware number of students who are out of schools without even a primary education or a secondary education? I think education starts with a shared responsibility, right? We spoke about leadership. What is leadership? Leadership is nothing about power, position, or titles, nothing about it. Leadership is responsibility. And that responsibility comes towards, providing the basic necessity that education for our students. We are talking about Asia Pacific region. 16 million children from primary education, 34 million students from secondary lower education out of school. Nine out of 10 students from lower middle class, and 3 out of 4 from middle class families. They go to school, but they don't have the basic literacy or numeracy skills. What I see is, Anjali, we are actually talking about AI taking disruptions, and we will have many other disruptions in education sector as well. But there's a huge gap on the other side where our children doesn't even have the basic literacy or numeracy skills. So improved education has the immense responsibility of shaping the skills of students, right? I mean, we have been talking about transformation in terms of economy, social, political reforms. But unless we set the basic education, address that and give solutions, Minister is here. I know that he had invited me for a couple of meetings about reforms happening in Sri Lanka. But unless we set this correct, I don't think as nations we are thriving. I feel there's a gap, I feel there's a crisis, and that crisis needs to be addressed now. I also feel that while we are talking about AI, the new skills, the jobs that demands for the future, we are also forgetting about the fact that there's a basic education for our own children, our girls and boys. A girl from a minority ethnic, from a village should have the equal amount of opportunity from a girl or a boy who is coming from a city. How far as individual nations we have addressed that issue is my biggest question. Of course, yes, we need to, it's not days we are living about, we see many MBAs, many MScs. Unfortunately, education also has become a mafia nowadays because you just sell titles, right? But we need is skills. And that skills start from the basic literacy and numeracy, which we need to understand. And educators and policymakers need to implement more flexible learning paths and assessments. Plans to accommodate all learning opportunities as well as listen to voices whom they are accountable. Not just us, the children or the adults who are getting into adults, we need to listen to them. I was speaking to Tara, she mentioned a brilliant thing. When we were not expecting something, COVID hit us. It's the same disaster for most of the countries, right? But there was a great case study from Singapore, how they prepared immediately. They shut the country down, but they didn't shut the schools down. So we have great examples from our regions, our neighboring countries. Have we taken those examples as practices for us? And that's why we created Big Bold Brave.
Very nice. Thank you, Kandi. Thank you. Because what you and Tara, between you, have highlighted that COVID created a learning loss. You've identified the issue of quality. That, of course, a country like India now has 100% enrollment in primary schools, but the quality of education is an issue. And what are we going to do about that? So that's a good question for you to jump off on. Yes, Honorable Cecile, how do we actually prepare for the future? How do we deal with these challenges and balance the issues of the past with the needs of the future?
So thank you, Dr. Anjali, panel members. Thank you, Kandi, for inviting me for this panel discussion. I met you a few days ago, and I have been sent just one page what's happening here, but it doesn't matter. First of all, I apologize for my late attendance because I was with a group of scientists and technologists at my ministry. Right. So then I think let me explain a little bit of the history of education in our country. So in 1946, then Minister of Education, Dr. C.W.W. Kannangara introduced the bill in that then State Council after having deliberations for 14 years in a committee stage, free education bill. By that time, the literacy rate in our country is somewhere around 46%. As a result of free education, since then, right, by now it's over 93.5% general literacy rate. So, this is a result of free education. But at the same time, when he introduced free education, there are three pillars in education generally. That is, of course, the attitudes, skills, and the knowledge. We are rich in knowledge. Attitudes also not bad so far in our country, whether it belongs to any ethnic group, right? But the issue is skills. That's what we missed for last 7 decades. Now, in 1961, there was another bill introduced by then government. At that time, the education minister was Dr. Baduddin Mohammed, that is taking off the private schools to the state, except about over 110 schools, all schools taken over by the government. So it was then, of course, it is the responsibility of the government to provide all the facilities in public schools. And again, after the introduction of 13th Amendment to the Constitution, the powers devolved to 9 provinces. So education is one of the subject devolved to respective 9 provinces. I was the Chief Minister of the Western Province from 1995 to 2000, and I handled 1,351 schools then as the Chief Minister and the Minister in charge of education. Then thereafter, at the next general election, I was elected to the Parliament, and the then President, Her Excellency Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga, appointed me as the Minister of Education. Dr. Tharadimel was with us. Then she continued, but I left the place after 1 year. That is as a result of election results. But however, after the introduction of 13th Amendment to the Constitution, there are thousands of schools managed by respective estates, tea estates, that management. But after the introduction of 13th Amendment to the Constitution, all these state schools also given to respective provincial councils. Now, at the moment, there are 399 schools. We call them national schools, but I don't agree that, right? I have different opinion, but there are 399 schools we call national schools managed by the Ministry of Education. Those are leading schools all over the places. At the same time, the rest, there are 10,126 public schools, rest over 9,000 schools managed by respective provincial councils. For an example, Western Province, at the moment they have 1,267 schools. The administrative system is 9 provinces. Under 9 provinces, you find 100 zones for the purpose of administration, and there are 312 divisions for the supervision of schools. And the schools categorized to 4, that is, you never understand that. Type 3, Type 2, 1C and 1AB. You never understand, but what we are going to do is, with the introduction of education transformation within next couple of months, number 1 priority given to the transformation of education administration. If you don't have a structure in place, so you can't go ahead. So that therefore, within next couple of months, we are going to increase the number of zones for the purpose of administration, 100 to 120. And under 120 zones, you find 350 school boards. That is for the supervision of the school. And there are 1,200 clusters covering entire 10,126 public schools. Right? So this is the structure that we are going to introduce. And then the reforms not enough at the moment. We have to go beyond reforms. So that is why we call it transformation of education. Even the UNESCO, after COVID-19, then you were discussing that, after COVID-19, in the year 2022, at the General Assembly of UNESCO, I attended that conference in Paris. The theme was transformation of education. The next year, digitalization of education. So we are heading for that goal at the moment, and then we have to achieve the number 4 of the SDG, quality and equal education for all by 2030. Targeting that, we want to transform the education. Now, here, of course, I will finish it within 1 or 2 minutes' time. So now the question is, what are the educational reforms? So I say it's not reform, it's a transformation. Then there will be address the future workforce requirements. Exactly, that's what we want to do. We are starting from kindergarten. So we issued a circular. According to UNICEF statistics, Dr. Taradimel, 20% of kids, right, before they come to grade 1, they are not going to any of the preschools. So I want to make sure that by now, of course, there will be about 310,000 childbirths in our country. We had about 340,000 10 years ago. It's coming down, right? So the student population. So as a result, I want to make sure the 100% of the students, if they are all right without any physical or other disabilities, about 2,000 to 3,000 every year. Other students, of course, kids, we have to enroll to the schools before that, pre-primary, that is after completion of 4 years of age.
So I think that
we are starting from that, and then that is preschool. Then, of course, general education categorization, primary, junior secondary and senior secondary, or primary and secondary. Primary 1 to 5, secondary 6 to 13. And there are some schools like
so it's
Royal
really
College 1 to 13,
yes,
right?
so
So this is the basically, but at the next round I can go beyond that.
Yes,
What are the curriculum developments and other things?
I'm just looking at the clock, Sushil, so thank you very much. I think what we've understood is that there's a learning loss, that there's an issue with quality, and now we're hearing from you the most important part, that implementation requires a framework. And it's very encouraging to see and hear from you that this has the attention of the government and that there's a policy framework that is being put in place to make implementation happen. So thank you, and we'll come back. But Munir, I'd like to hear any comments from you on this, keeping an eye on the clock.
Thank you. Thank you, Anjali. Thank you, Excellency. That was very helpful. There's a lot of discussion taking place on what we do inside a country and how do we upskill, how do we not reform, but we do a transformative education. I like to bring your attention to linking migration to the economy. I think this is an area there perhaps we as a community here, we can participate and we can support not only the migrant communities, but also the governments. Let me try to share with you some of the numbers. The total ODA for 22 was about $200 billion globally. The total FDI was anywhere between 1 to 1.5 trillion dollars. Does anybody want to venture what was the global remitted incomes? Does anybody want to take a wild guess? Very close, Candy. Minister Saab, it was $800 billion. Now, this is a life-sustaining inward remittance that's coming in. And many countries depend heavily on it, anywhere from 50% to 10%. Now, why am I bringing this thing up? In South Asia, Anjali, remitted incomes account for $200 billion. India being the largest recipient of about $100 billion. And if you go down the list, you got Bangladesh around 24, Pakistan probably around 30, and Sri Lanka is about 6 billion with 1.5 million registered migrants. Now, why am I bringing this thing up? I had met the Minister for Education in Dhaka about 2 weeks ago. And I tried to discuss the notion that we have some 10 million migrant workers going from Bangladesh every year, sending about $2 billion a month. They go out mostly totally unskilled. They don't even speak English. And I would argue that if we were to take this low-hanging fruit, and before we send migrants out, I suggest we bring certain skills to bear. And in terms of Bangladesh, we have done some initial studies. Just by having basic English competency with the same number of migrants of 10 million, we can increase remitted incomes by 30%. Now here's an opportunity. Not only you are improving the quality of lives of those migrants going out, rather than them doing menial jobs and other tasks and earn very little money, and after their expenses in the host country, very little can be sent back. Our argument has been that if we channel resources to upskilling specifically these communities, it would be an increase of 20-30% to the revenues of these countries. And we all know how important foreign reserves are, especially when we are negotiating with the IMF and others. So it's very important if we can address this. 2 final numbers I'd like to leave Anjali. McKinsey has estimated that because of AI and generative AI and the technological movement we are going to have, some 400 million to 800 million people will be displaced. This is not my number, this is McKinsey's number, if you believe them. This is staggering. Now add to that the total global migrant immigration population. It is estimated it's around 200 million. And Anjali, to add to this one final point, some 50 million displaced people today, refugees or internally displaced, are floating from one place to the other. This is the opportunity that we have. And if we are going to be big, bold, and brave, I think this is an area that we could perhaps all come together and work with the governments and international organizations to improve those skills. I'll stop here, Anjali.
Thank you very much. I think that was brilliant. That was brilliant. I think what we are seeing over here is that education is not only for the children in school, but it is continuous learning to continue through adulthood. And how do we build that? So the real important question that comes through based on what we've heard from the panel is that education is really seen as a bridge between the past and the future. But educators, see, we come from Harvard University, and our scope is really to build educators, to educate leaders who make a difference in the world. In that process, are we going to be looking at education just as a commercial proposition? Organizations, corporations, even governments think of education as a meal ticket. They want educational institutions to produce work-ready widgets whom they can just slot into a job. Unfortunately, jobs are changing, and educational institutions cannot produce those work-ready widgets. Maybe that's the job of the corporations, to sharpen the diamonds. What is only important for the educational institutions to do is to create and craft and polish the diamonds so that they can shine anywhere. The last cutting needs to be done by the corporations or the governments that want to employ them. So this question is something that I'll throw open to the panel and then to the audience if anybody wants to comment. There's also a gentleman in the audience who's talked about, who has some experience on skilling at scale. Aditya, if he's here. So I'd like him to comment as well. So anybody wants to comment on the role of educational institutions and the role of corporations in polishing the diamond and sharpening the brilliance?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we spoke of, a shared responsibility, right? You know, it's not just part of a responsibility of education ministry alone, and they can't do it alone. And that's where the partnership, public-private partnerships, development sector comes into play. And I want to thank what Munir mentioned. It's a brilliant thing. You know, if we can focus, especially what Munir mentioned is a very important issue or very important concern of the Asia-Pacific region, most of the countries. So can we come together, and the purpose or the vision of Big Bold Brave APAC regional conference itself is that. So how do we get change makers who want to make a difference in the world? It could be public sector organizations, governments, private sector organizations, individuals. There are many of you who are part of that ecosystem. You know, I know I have conversations with Kapil, Aditya, there are Swin, there's Titus here, different countries. You all are doing your best to make that difference happen. But this is an opportunity for all of us, as Munir said. All of us comes together and create that.
So let's hear from Aditya if he's here. Aditya, are you here? Because this is one person who's actually made a difference at scale on educating tribals from the poorest part of our country. Aditya?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, and what a great panel. I live in Orissa, it's the Tier 2 city of India. So we actually be running a free school or college or university of 30,000 students, completely free of cost. We provide free food, free accommodation, free healthcare, and they're the first-time learners from their family. They're all tribal children. And with the support of another private university that we run, which has 40,000 students from across India. When I'm talking today, there are 75 Sri Lankan students studying in my university and 2,000 students from different parts of the world. So when we started in 1992, Dr. Samantha who started this, both the university, he started with 2 teachers, 12 students, 1 room, with a $100 investment. And the tribal school at that point of time, we took some students from the slums area, I think 15 or 20 of them in 1992. Till today, in 2024, we have 40,000 students studying in person. From 2 teachers, we have 15,000 employees. And from a $100 investment, today we have our turnover is $250 million a year. What we did at the time when we grow KIT to at this level, then we grow the other universities, the school, college, and university at the same pace. So 70% of our turnover goes to run KISS because we want to make it sustainable, not donor dependent. And today it's running. So when last month we hosted Mr. Bill Gates at the campus, we were so surprised to see the scale. He said, I don't understand how could you guys scale up like this? But I think this is what you require. You need more compassion, more giving in nature. And any private university across India are making a lot of money. And we're not like Ambani's or Adanis or anyone else. We're just a private university. And we can run another free private university for the indigenous community completely free. And the students are not only doing well, we have more than 1,500 students from KISS play for the national and international games. The fastest runner of India belongs to my school. Half of my rugby team players are from KISS, from hockey, from rugby, from archery. So they all from the first-time learner, first-time generation families. And most of them get jobs as a police, judges, they're getting into civil services. So it's all possible. And we are so positive on what we are doing. So I think it's all possible in this world if you just have the good intention to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya.
That is, of course, I was with some scientists and technologists had done their postgraduate research, and they were awarded by our National Science Foundation. So there, of course, there was a keynote speaker. He is Dr. Harsha Subasinghe. He is the CEO of Cogen. He has branches in 8 countries, including India. So his keynote address is lasting about 45 minutes or 1 hour. He is the person who produced Vega, one of the most powerful super car, and then now of course he has started converting all tuk-tuks, three-wheelers into electricity. Here in Sri Lanka we have about 1.2 million tuk-tuks, right? So the consumption of fuel every year going up to at least 1.5 billion US dollars, right? So then now he is in the process of converting all tuk-tuks to electric, right? So that is one example. So then he is always engaged with industry, and then he addresses youths, university students, and A-level students, and so they are free to go there and then see how they can join with them. And then he has started another institute in Kandy. He has about 50-acre land, abandoned tea estate. There he has started another innovation park, of course. This is one example. And then in December, I visited the IIT Madras, right? Recently, I sent a group of our academics to IIT, so we are going to start branch in Sri Lanka. We are in the process. So there, of course, I was shown the innovation park and the research park. So India, all large companies, Ambani, Tata, all these, they have their incubators, right? So that the youths were trained at IIT, so next door, so they have the industry, so they can get the first-hand experience and they can improve their skills, and straight away they go to the job market. Similarly, in Sri Lanka, we started in 1959 German technology, GCTI, right? It's under my ministry now. So every year over 700 youths selected after a written examination and the practical examination, practicals, and then after 4 years, they all leave the country. In Australia, you find over 1,500 alumni of GCTI, right? So they have a very good life. So then these are some examples. So now we are in the process of transformation education. This I will explain it. There are 3 main sectors, that is general education, the higher education, and the skills development and technical education. So then focus in these 3, of course, we are going to match the industry requirement, the market requirement with our education.
Thank you. And just building on what you were saying, the Indian government has brought the skills ministry and the HR ministry under one roof. So the branding issue that was raised earlier, that people don't want to do vocational training because they say, who wants to marry a plumber? In South Asia, you're not going to give your Harvard-educated daughter to a plumber. But by bringing them all under one roof, we hope that some of this branding issue will be resolved in a way. And the other thing that the Indian government is doing is to introduce an educational ID so that you can actually put your credits into that ID and carry it with you. It becomes transportable across your whole lifetime. So instead of saying that I finished my education, I've done this degree, the concept of lifelong learning and educating yourself your whole life, if we can introduce that concept, maybe that will be good. But I see that we have overstepped our time. Tara, I'd like you to give the closing comment, if you don't mind.
Yes, most certainly. I just want to make a few comments on reskilling and upskilling, because you mentioned skilling several times, and so did my fellow panelists. I think when you mention the word skills today, it's almost synonymous with the tech skills, the digital skills, the AI skills, and the range of new skill sets. I just want to go into a slightly more fundamental set of skills, which may not be that expensive, which may not need the kind of infrastructure for the other hard skill sets that I mentioned, but basic skills which can easily be introduced, I feel, into school system in low and middle income countries like ours, which would also help school leavers to access some kind of respectable employment and perhaps address the issue of migration that you mentioned. And here I'm talking of the traditional 21st century skills sets, you know, the 4 C's, creative thinking, critical learning, collaborative learning, communication, and so on. But over and above that, the necessity for the type of skills that complex problem solving can be done with. A student on leaving school would necessarily have to be skilled to be able to understand in a 360-degree view a situation that he or she may face, maybe in the company, maybe in the society, maybe in a CSO, maybe in his or her own village. You know, that kind of skills, which I think they're absolutely essential today, and I think the World Economic Forum published several reports on these in the last few years, apart from the kinds of skill sets that future jobs and future employment trends would need. Without these basic foundational skill sets and also behavioral skill sets, I don't think it'll be very easy for students to be able to find a job or to enter community and society in a meaningful way. Often we neglect that and we go into thinking about the financial resources, the infrastructure resources that we need for the more sophisticated and the most elaborate skill sets. So I would like to make that as like a parting comment and to say thank you very much for arranging this panel. It was very exciting, and thank you so much to you.